What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm thrilled to introduce to you a whistleblower that has just inspired me to the depths of my soul and somebody that I'm really excited to introduce to you guys today. His name is Jack Pendergrass. I met Jack on Twitter, actually, where I've been meeting a lot of people fighting, whether it's for survivors, whether it is survivors, or activists fighting for survivors. I've connected with a lot of really amazing people on that platform, and Jack's content really stood out for me. For one, because it's rare to see men standing up and talking about topics such as family court, human trafficking, survivors, children. And his content just inspired me so much because he's one of the few out there, boots on the ground, talking about this. And I've been chatting with him a lot and realized that there's a lot of depth to this incredible story that he has. And I think the world needs to hear it. Jack, back in 2013, 2014, lost parental rights to his daughter through family court as she was trafficked to the other parent. And ever since, he's been not only fighting for his daughter, but really researching and digging into these systematic issues and problems and people that are physically trafficking children and creating a facade to the public that all is fair and just in the family court systems. Jack happened to stumble on a massive corporation called Maximus Inc. that I'm actually going to be learning a lot about today along with you guys, and has been posting a lot about it, and is claiming that this company is responsible for being an umbrella over a lot of these systems, and it's fully integrated, yet it goes very unnoticed by people. Even people fighting for their children have no awareness most of the time that this massive overhead company exists. So today, Jack's going to come on and share with you not only his story, but some of the research that he's accumulated after almost a decade of digging into this really massive system. And I'm just honored to bring him today to help enlighten you, me, and to help give people tools. So hopefully we can not only get children back out of these systems, but we can prevent these really horrific and devastating situations from happening to other parents and children. So without further ado, Jack, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thanks, Emma. I'm really excited to be chatting with you and trying to help. So
I know, I feel like I already know you because we chat all the time on Twitter, and I'm always wondering who's the person on the other side of the screen. So I'm really grateful to you that not only for your time, but just for avenues like Zoom and podcasting and social media where we can connect with like-minded people, because it's tough being in this fight,
yeah, you get into I don't know, for lack of a better term, you end up in a vacuum,
Yes.
You feel isolated, and it's only through social media that I've been able to connect with really connect with other parents who have been through this the family court system, CPS, dealing with child support, all the fraud that's occurring in the so-called courts. So thank you again for having me on.
You're
this
welcome.
This is for everybody. So we got to get the information out, as much as we can, because it affects all of us.
I agree. And like I said, it's amazing seeing you as a man coming out and talking about all of this. You could easily be fighting behind the scenes and not being loud, and it's inspiring. There's not the movement surrounding children, which it makes sense because women are the mothers of children and have that motherly reputation to uphold for their femininity. But at the same time, I think men offer such a drastically different part in this fight, and that protective role and that strong role and that role that us women need to lean on. We need to have men in this fight helping us and helping share this information and being that strong masculine part of this fight. So I'm so thrilled to have you on. And although I'm sorry about what happened to you, it's also really amazing the value that you're giving other people who might either be going through this or who may go through this in the future, people to hear your story. You have so much insight on how this works. And a lot of people don't know until years down the road after they've done their own research and realize all the different things that they were completely unconscious of while going through the system. So I'd love for you if you could give us just some background information on you, so people who may not have connected with you can get to know you a little bit, maybe kind of where you grew up and how your life led to you, in a sense, where you are now and up until this 2013-14 period of your life.
So I grew up in a small city north of Chattanooga, Tennessee, southeast corner of Tennessee, maybe 30 minutes from the Georgia border, right? The town's called Soddy Daisy. So this is pretty much where I've been all my life, right? So in the late 2000s, I started seeing my daughter's mother, 2003, we were expecting my daughter. And as the years passed, things were never kosher, so to speak. There was a lot of external influences in our relationship. The biggest being, a family that is they're attorneys. So, but to backtrack a little bit, I am a former tattoo artist, professional tattoo artist, and batch process, chemical operator, compounder. I worked for DuPont, Big Pharma, and a few other companies in the chemical industry for about a decade. Maybe another topic for another day, but those chemical companies are involved in child trafficking as well. So I'll get into that later. But initially, how I became involved with Maximus and going through the research and figuring out what I have, it's an aggregate. And I went through some pretty bad times, losing my parental rights with my daughter. That was, like you said, in 2013, 2014. So it was only after then, everybody says hindsight's 2020. Well, the same thing holds true for me. It wasn't until after that situation where I started really paying attention to what's happening. And all that led me to Maximus. Initially, it was through child support, Title 4D funding. And if you're not familiar with that, Title 4D funding was written into law in 1975 by the Ford administration, right? It was set up prior to then, but it wasn't really opened up until 1975, which subsequently was the same year Maximus was founded. So, you have parallels there, and there are no coincidences. So.
Wow, that's very interesting, because I was talking to you before we got on here, but it seems that people fighting the family court systems, the focus is really on the family court and the judge and the people that are directly involved with the court, which they're all complicit in these crimes also for what they're doing. But it's amazing to me that you're the first person I've ever heard talk about Maximus. How exactly what part of your research, you mentioned the child support, but what about Maximus got you to start digging into what they are versus following the route that a lot of parents do of kind of staying on that family court level?
I knew that there had to be a source for all of this, right? It doesn't just happen. It doesn't just spring up. Everything's calculated as far as the government's concerned, and all these special interest groups, corporations. They have business models they follow. So I started learning about Title 40 funding there again. The Social Security Act in 1975, and I started learning a little bit about law, contract law, things of that nature. And I was like, well, who got those initial contracts? It happened to be Maximus Incorporated. They were the first company to receive the first Title 4D funding contract. They were also the first company to receive the first welfare to work program. That didn't happen by chance. David Vincent Mastrin, who is the founder of Maximus, was in the agency that predates Health and Human Services. It was called the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. He was a whiz kid, right? So this guy was involved in Black Ops in Vietnam. If you had a picture of a deep state operative, that guy would be the poster boy. He's been involved in some very shady things. So what he learned in the Air Force and those Black Ops programs, and his own father was involved. They're second generation West Point people, so they're part of the military industrial complex. So they started applying those principles that they learned there into welfare programs, child support programs, healthcare programs of every type that you can imagine. So that's where I'm at, is really looking into these people and seeing how all these laws came about, and it's through their direct influence. We're talking ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council. I could list agencies for days, and they've influenced everybody.
Wow. So this, like I said, this is a really big deal that is just flying under the radar. Now, Maximus Inc. It's kind of a twofold question that I have, but what is the perception that Maximus Inc. tells the public that they are? So if you read about Maximus, what's kind of the front cover of what they say they do? And then go into what you have found out that they're actually complicit in.
Maximus will, part of their PR, they say that they're a government services provider. And in other words, the government contracts with them to provide, services that maybe they don't have the employees for, or don't have the resources for. So Maximus provides those services. What they're really doing, have done, and will do is replacing the government. They're privatizing everything. So they're stripping the government power and using that to facilitate and add to their own power structure. So David Mastrin, I've read quite a bit about him, and some of the quotes he said, all points to one thing. It's the usurpation of the government. They want to privatize everything, and his company, Maximus Incorporated, is hailed as one of the initial companies that began all of that. He kind of picked up Ross Perot's torch, so to speak, when Ross Perot had started privatizing all the information for Medicaid and Medicare, right? Maximus now controls 100% of the Medicaid and Medicare programs in the United States. They run everything. So that's just one small facet of that company. More recently, I've discovered, Maximus has 400 subsidiaries. They're operating in 11 countries. And when I say operating, I mean running entire countries' healthcare care programs. And the UK alone, they're running their healthcare programs, but they're also contracted to run their Department of Ministry contracts. So they're overseeing healthcare, the judiciary. If you're going to jail or you have a prison sentence, they're overseeing the contracts that the government has with private prisons. In Italy, the program they have, which is basically a job placement program, that's funded by the European Union. They've been contracting in Australia since, I think, 2001, 2002. So they start out basically running the healthcare programs, and then just like an octopus, extend their tentacles, and they are in every facet of everybody's life, whether or not you realize it or not. The United States is, they're probably the most invasive in the United States. I mean, anywhere from, at last count, I think it had 25 or 30 agencies that they're contracting with and running their programs, maybe more now. I'm sure it's more now. Anywhere from, like anyone from the NOAA to the IRS to the DMV, the United States Patent and Trade Office, the Edgar system. Gosh, I mean, I've got lists somewhere, but and I know they're on my Twitter feed. But everybody in the United States is literally in their databases. So that's their biggest thing is data. They're a huge data mining corporation. So whoever controls the data has the power. And that's it in a nutshell. So,
Gosh, so are they colluding at all with big tech also, do you think? Big tech being such a big data collector also, or do they act more as a competitor to that?
these companies, just from my research, these companies are passing each other around. In Maximus, you have former IBM execs, and I don't know how many people are aware. IBM provided the technology for Hitler during the Holocaust, right? They provided and created the magnetic paper, which was used to record everybody's information. That system of numbering was what predates the Social Security number. So IBM has been contracting with Maximus since Maximus began, probably before that. Well, I know, now that I think about it, well before that. So they've had all these databases and biometric databases. I mean, anything that you can think of, anywhere from your hair color to your eye color, DNA. This has all been recorded for in excess of 50 years. So it's not just a family court case that these people affect, not just CPS or child support. Literally everybody in the United States is in their databases. They have access to your Social Security records, your medical records, your parents' medical records, probably your grandparents' medical records. They have been given that much power. More recently, with the Affordable Health Care Act that Obama enacted, that was through Minnesota. It's called the Minnesota Federal Hub, and I found that information from a woman named Twyla Brace. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's an RN, PHN, and I think I've posted some of her information before. The Minnesota Federal Database was the largest single transfer of data to one federal system in the history of the United States. Maximus made that possible. So, and this is going to sound probably pretty esoteric or just out there, or a conspiracy theory, however you want to label it. I talked to a gentleman, and I'm no longer in contact with him. He's kind of fallen off the radar, so to speak. He found the servers, traced back the servers, and found the servers. The information that was contained in those databases was transferred to China. More recently, I found that there are CCP informants or employees working for Maximus, and I think Singapore. They have an office in Singapore off of it. So that's the scary part. They have all this information on every United States citizen. So you see where we're at. I mean, it's scary that one company has that much power. I mean, it's frightening.
100%. Why do you think that they do fly under the radar the way that they do?
They have that much power. Again, they have that much power. There was a case in New York. I can't remember the case number or name. But the state comptroller was blocked from looking at the evidence that Maximus had. Like, they were just shut out of the case altogether. They could not audit. So they have, all this power to remove themselves from public eye. They're well known, of course, in the federal government, local governments, and most of the time, their contracts are non-compete contracts. In other words, they're just given the contracts, so they can remove themselves from the public life. When I began tweeting about them and some of their employees, their upper level CEOs, managers, supervisors, I did notice they started scrubbing Twitter of those people's names. So I've had to go back and confirm that. One fellow, his name is Akbar Palodi. He's currently running the programs in Australia. I found him pretty prevalently when I began tweeting about Maximus and some of the other people, and I can't find him too well now. So they've hidden these people away, kept them out of the public eye intentionally. And most of the time, if there is a suit brought against them, they just settle. They generate billions a year. Their contracts are massive. I found one contract in particular about 3 years ago between Maximus and the NIH that was worth 20 billion. That was for one contract for one contractor. More recently, I found an Army contract worth 12.1 billion. That's excluding all the agencies in the states. I mean, I've never seen anything like this. Never. And I'll be 45 this year, so.
Gosh, it's overwhelming to think about that. There's so many veils that the controllers, the elite, whatever you want to call them, the people in charge have really put so many veils on everybody's eyes that even when you start to wake up to something, it's incomprehensible almost, like how many more layers there are on top of all of it, and how invisible they are, which is crazy because they're so massive in that way.
Yeah, I'm studying daily and learning things daily. So, I don't want anybody to think, as we were talking before we started, I'm still very much a neophyte in this learning what they have control of. I mean, it's outrageous. And I think 2 years ago, I learned that BlackRock is the parent company. BlackRock is the parent company. Vanguard, these are their top institutional stockholders, right? And I can only imagine, what members of Congress or Senate or governors, or anybody else in a position of supposed authority, what kind of investments they have in this company, and I think last year I just found that the state of Tennessee, their Treasury Department owns stock in Maximus, a significant amount of stock. So that compromises literally every child support case in Tennessee, because the magistrates and judges, the state's attorneys, they're all protecting their pecuniary interests in this company.
That seems like a massive conflict of interest.
Doesn't it?
Ask me.
Yeah. I mean, it's huge. But there again, what do you do with a company that's that massive these people that, in my opinion, aren't people. They're evil. Only an evil person would look at another and think, I'm going to make money off of you, and extort you to do so. And they're looking at children in this manner. So I can't. A normal person, a normal decent person, cannot or should not think like that. But this is who they are. So.
And unfortunately, there's a lot of people like that in the world and running our world that have that same unconscious evilness about them. And again, we're so oblivious to it because they give us this persona and this facade that's completely opposite of what's going on. Now, bringing this back to your case and how it relates to that, the word trafficking is very new to a lot of people, and it's something that a lot of people still don't even know about. When did that word come into your vocabulary, and how did you learn that what you're going through could potentially or is trafficking?
Yeah, it's completely it's complete trafficking. It's legalized trafficking through the courts. The courts are not courts per se. Every court, and I'm talking the U.S. district courts. I think even the Supreme Court has a Dun and Bradstreet number. A Dun and Bradstreet number is it's for businesses, to obtain credit ratings. So all these courts, quote unquote, have them. And I don't want that to sound inaccurate. So if somebody is watching this and they hear that and they maybe know that a little bit better than I, by all means, I'm open to learn. But as far as I know, that's what the purpose of a Dun and Bradstreet number is for, is to receive a credit rating from the federal government. So, but there again, it's we're dealing with corporations, contracting with corporations. How is this related to my case directly is what I've learned, and I hope I'm not misspeaking on this. The courts do an assessment of the parents. They look at you and what you're capable of making, make an assessment on how much they can take from you over the course of your child's life. But the child has to be there in order for them to do that, right? So they're also looking at the child and seeing, gosh, the children at chattel, human capital. That's what they're looking at. How much can we get from the parents, or some children in foster care are trafficked by means of Medicaid and Social Security fraud. They're applying for benefits, not fulfilling their end, getting funding through Social Security and Medicaid and things of that nature. My daughter, she I'll give you an example. My first child support hearing, they started questioning me about, my income and things of that nature. At the end of my first hearing, I was $11,000 in back child support. There was some contention on my daughter's paternity, right? Not to get too detailed on that, but so there was some contention, and after a period of time, we both had, DNA analysis, right? So it was determined, that she is in fact my daughter. So for the year and a half, almost 2 years that was up for contention, they went back, and that's how I ended up in $11,000 in arrears at the first hearing. So at the time, the state of Tennessee was also tagging 12% compound annual interest onto those arrears. So for every court case, there are bonds with attached securities generated. The district courts buy those bonds, and that gets fed into it's called the CRIS system. All those bonds, all that money generated, each court case is a taxable event, right? So it's all related to banking, finance, IRS. Everybody's getting paid, and it's all at the expense of the parents and the children.
So really, when somebody goes to court, whether it is an individual or somebody that is fighting for a child or anything in between, is it safe to say that behind the scenes, it's not just justice that they're looking at, if they're even looking at that at all, but it's, okay, how do we take this case and squeeze the most amount of money out of it that we possibly can?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. The deeper you go, the more you realize, that's exactly what they're doing. If they were truly concerned with what's lawful, they wouldn't have all these statutes, rules, regulations. They would fall back to the Constitution. God forbid they do that, because then you would have to have accountability and oversight, and these corporations have none of that. And part of 4D funding is that you have to have a magistrate, not a judge, but a magistrate overseeing the cases.
What's the difference between those for people who aren't familiar with?
Magistrates are judicial officers, right? The magistrates are more or less like a referee between you and the state's attorney. What they say is federal law is, it's repugnant to the Constitution. And any law that's supposedly written that's repugnant to the Constitution is pretty much null and void on its face. There again, I started researching the laws, and those how that works, but there hasn't been a judge, quote unquote judge, since 1789 in the United States. So it's all under a color of law. It's all corporations exploiting the ignorance of good people.
And it's so scary to think about that, because there's, we were talking before we jumped on here, just people have this ideation and belief from, whether it's watching movies in Hollywood, whether it's something like Judge Judy. There's a lot of pieces in place to program the public over and over and over and over and over again, all throughout time, that courts are truly used for justice. And that's a belief system that's really hard for people to let go of, I think, because that's terrifying to think about the fact that a court system could operate like any business. And that's the thing that I try to drive home with people who argue one way or another, or just who don't understand, is it's like, look at any business in the whole world. Maybe somebody owns a business and they can relate personally, or they're working at one or for one. That's the point of a business, is to figure out, how do we monetize however we can and be the most successful, most profitable. Like, money is the driving force of all businesses. And people forget that the government and all the systems that are under it, it is a business that is run, and it does not fund, it doesn't work. People don't get paid without money coming in. And as with any business, that's the goal. People want more money. If you're somebody that your livelihood depends on kickbacks, depends on bonuses, depends on incentives, that's what you're going to push for. And everybody has a price tag, right? And you find that the price tag is pretty low hanging for a lot of people, especially because, we could go even deeper into it to the satanic element of court, right? That there's actual people that are put in place from the time that they're small. They're going to be put in a position of power to protect people laundering money, and to be the face of that and to say, well, I'm a judge, so everything I do is right. The Constitution doesn't apply to me. Whatever I say goes. Court's up, you know? And I think that that's really important that you talk about this, because it's helping shatter that programming that people have, that the courts are specifically there to do good and that their goal is to do justice and there's not ever money involved.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I was under that spell for a long time. I was like, I'll just go tell the truth. They do not care about the truth. Um, family courts are the bottom of the barrel. And that, not just what they do, but the people who run them, that's the bottom of the barrel in the legal profession. Um, they don't allow recording, so there's no accountability. They allow hearsay, just all these horrible things. Like I said, most good people, decent people, cannot comprehend why they do not receive justice. Well, you're looking at essentially powerful, quote unquote, powerful debt collectors. That's all they're doing. And the expenses, it's at our own expense. Um, it's an evil system, and more recently, we've seen stuff on the Maxwell case, right? I'm looking at avenues right now trying to connect Maximus to some of that stuff, and there is sufficient evidence to suggest that all this is involved, like all these companies, like Maximus, they're involved in child trafficking, not just through the courts, but through other nefarious means. I mean, it's a lot to unpack, and I sound like I'm rambling, but there's just so much information. So you start here, in the centralized idea of what this thing is, and then it becomes nebulous and it just expands. But what I want to do is, give everybody kind of a primer on this. Read the information on every source you can. And not to toot my own horn, check out my pinned tweet. It's pretty accurate. Always adding to that. But everybody needs a good primer on what these people are doing and how you end up in these messed up, quote unquote, courts.
100%. And I love following you on Twitter. You don't stick with just Maximus stuff either. You tweet about a lot of really current and true things, and I think everybody should go follow you. Now with your case, at what point, so when you were going through this 2013, 14, and as you said, then you're going through it with the expectation of, if I tell the truth, justice will be served. Like the courts will know what to do, and I'm not going to be penalized. I'm especially not going to be, have my child stripped from my care. At what point, what was it for you? And you don't have to directly talk about your court case, but what led you down the route of finding out about trafficking? How did that come into play to where that clicked with you and you said, that's what they're doing? Because you said at the time you might not have known some of the things that you do now. Did you know about trafficking then, or did that come about through your research and you're like, that's what happened to me?
I had an inkling of an idea about trafficking. I guess my red pill moment, like, I worked for DuPont in the early 2000s, and I started investigating DuPont. And that's what these people are doing. Let me try to make this cohesive. So all these powerful corporations, are, let's call it what it is, right? They're pedophiles. A lot of these people are pedophiles. So they're blackmailing other pedophiles. Maximus has worked with the Catholic Church, and I can trace it directly to the Vatican, the Archdiocese in Tennessee, specifically Nashville. So it's been an aggregate of information that's, there's not been, I guess, quote unquote, like a eureka moment. It's been an aggregate, it's been slowly pull pieces from here, and arrived at this point, and it's taken a long time, and like I said, I'm still learning about it. So, what really put me on the trail of Maximus was, there again, child support, but I did have a eureka moment about finding them. It was when I was going through some paperwork, and I noticed the postage on one of my letters, or one of my packets they send, or whatever. I requested some information. So one of the postage labels said state of Tennessee. Child support enforcement is, or child support enforcement office, or something of that nature. A few weeks later, a couple months later, the postage read Maximus Child Support Services. And I was like, well, how do they go from the state operating the child support agency to a private business? So I called the court, the quote unquote child support court. And she didn't give her name, but I said, how does a private business acquire jurisdiction over anything? How does that happen? She said, well, the state is Maximus is the state. That was her statement, and it took me a while to comprehend that, because she was telling the truth. Maximus operates as the government. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Maximus has essentially replaced any government that we have. So that was my moment of clarity there. I was like, well, here we go. This is the central source from which all of this stuff in family court has sprang forth. Like you said, here's the umbrella. So what's tucked up under that umbrella? Well, the umbrella is Maximus. Everything else is tucked up nicely under it. So that's how I arrived at Maximus. So one of the last times I went to child support court, I was looking around all the staff. Literally everybody in there were Maximus contractors. The state's attorney was a Maximus contractor. The magistrates are actually contractors through the Title IV-D program. Everybody in there is a contractor. And so that's where the bar comes in, right? The attorneys are, they're all bar members. I think the state of Tennessee has something like 27,000 attorneys. A lot of them are in family courts because it generates so much money. I'm talking 50 to 100 billion a year, just in the United States alone for the family court system. Last figures I had on the child support system that started in 75, there's been almost $1 trillion collected. And many states have what's known as, they can, sorry about losing the terminology here. They can either distribute the child support or they can withhold it. I think in 2018, the state of Tennessee had something in excess of like $20 million in undistributable child support. They had almost 750 million in TANF funds that they were withholding. And they used that during the supposed COVID pandemic to support other programs. So they've been doing this a long time. It's a well-oiled machine.
Gosh, that's amazing. Those stats from just Tennessee, right? If that's just one state, and
Yeah,
it's happening all over the world and country in every single state, that is a massive money-making machine.
it's immense. I think it was in the 40s or 50s, the United States was to, and in part, they signed the Hague Treaty, right? It wasn't, as far as child support, it was called the Uniform Interstate Family Support Act, which made the United States compliant with child support. So that was I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, that was in 2018 that was the United States finally signed up, which means if you have a case in the United States, they can track you globally to find you to collect child support. That's barring if you can even exit the country. So you have this massive system where they can track you or your child. Now, how does that relate to anything? Well, if you're trafficking children, they need to know where they're at, and they can do that. And the speed at which they can do it is just in a few minutes. They can locate you within just a few minutes.
Oh my gosh. That's, I mean,
Yeah,
it's scary to think about this power that one central organization has over such a large collective of people and children. Now,
yeah, it's frightening. It is truly frightening. I've never seen anything like this.
and I mean, you said that this goes beyond just, parents and children and family court. So they probably have that same access, I would think, to just about anybody. If you've had any type of data that they've collected on you, that they could still, take that file and dig up anything that they want on you at any point.
Yeah, I started researching Maximus and what they have done. Maximus is the company responsible for the databases for foster care, teen pregnancies, and runaways. That began with IBM, and it's called BAE Systems, BAE, BAE Systems. These are all military contractors that have been tracking people for a long, long time. So they have all these, I think BAE Systems, I talked with a friend of mine who's on Facebook. I think one of his relatives worked for BAE Systems. BAE Systems generated the algorithms so they could use it to track people through these databases. They've been doing this since, at least the 60s, which is where the Maxwell case comes into play. That goes to the NSA, the Prism software, the Promise software, Pegasus. So it's all related. So they can track you globally, quite easily. And all they need is a social security number, or each birth certificate is numbered. So they can do it through many ways. But the invasiveness of Maximus is just, it cannot be underscored or underestimated enough. They've had biometric databases for a long time. They had one in just right after 9/11. I'm talking within 2 months of 9/11. They had a biometric database set up in the airports, and they have a patent for it, where they were tracking people from the moment they got to the airport to the time they left. That's just one, and last year, April of last year, Maximus, through the CDC, set up the federal vaccine database. That was under the guise of a call center contract that's worth almost $1 billion. So I just can't underscore enough, how dangerous this company is and how long they've gotten away with all of this. They fleeced everybody. Good people, all on the basis of increasing their profit margins and the government's profit margins. That's their bottom line, profits.
It all goes back to following the money,
Yeah,
that's always what it comes to. That's hard for people to comprehend that, it's, again, that veil that gets placed over our eyes. We are drawn to people and think that people have our best interest in mind, especially seeing somebody like a judge or a business owner or anybody in a position of power, the amount of time that it takes to get into that position and the amount of money, you think in your mind and in your heart that, gosh, if somebody's going to go through 7, 8, 10, 12 years of their life in school and spending all these hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're going to do something very good with that credential once they get it, and you realize that not only do these people have bills to pay, but they're in it to make money. They're competitive, and money is always the bottom line. That's what drives people, especially owners and type A people and the type of people that get into these positions of power. That's how they got there to begin with, was having that drive to do that and that competitive nature. And whether or not they're cultists, there's also that, that's part of their culture, is to do that. If they're involved with Satanism and the occult systems too, it's their duty to do that to their cult. So there's all these different reasons that it makes total sense why this is true and why that is how people should start looking at it. It's no different than any other business, and if anything, it's even more nefarious and more grotesque in that way, because like you said, you're not just trying to profit off of a product that you made or an invention or something that's not alive. You're profiting off of humans and humans' data and trying to make the most money off of a child, despite the outcome of where the child ends up. That's not the main attribute of what they look for in these in the court case results. They're basing their decisions off of what makes them the most money, regardless of if the child gets put in an abusive home or away from a loving parent. And it's so terrifying to think that people have that, and that a company this big is controlling so many different elements of that. And like you said, millions and millions of people.
Yeah, it's not, a normal person shouldn't be able to even think about things in terms of that nature, like it's mind-boggling. And I've seen some of your podcasts, good versus evil. This is a spiritual battle, and there is no question about that. You have evil people in high positions who have been given all this authority, or we've relinquished our sovereign rights given to us by God through deception from them. It's part of the beast system. And I think, if you read your Bible, if you're spiritual or in any kind of way, then I think that should be your first place to look for information is scripture. And believe me, all of this has tested my faith. I'm a relatively simple guy, I'm a southern guy, grew up in the Bible Belt where people tell the truth. And they're accountable for their actions. These people have no morals, they have none of what I just mentioned. There's nothing there. It's money and power. Whatever positions they can put themselves in, and whomever they step on or over or whatever is inconsequential to them. It's terrible. It's terrible at best.
Yeah, to say the least, and it's like how I said, it's crazy how our perception, how deep this programming goes with people, that's not even on their radar to comprehend that people in these positions of power could literally only be doing what they're doing for money and not care about the people that they're the authority over, or the people that they're making a life-changing decision for. It is really scary. Can you walk us through, you mentioned the child support aspect and some of the governing bodies underneath Maximus, but could you go over kind of the overview of how Maximus is, how we can quite literally say they're trafficking children and humans?
So we'll have to go back to just right before Title 4D was passed, right? So we're talking about 72, 73. Welfare. We're also talking about the feminist movement. And I don't want anyone to think I'm being sexist or anything of that nature. What welfare, Roe versus Wade, and child support created was a poverty class. Women who couldn't, maybe let me try to make this cohesive and coherent. So Roe versus Wade made the fetal tissue industry legal, right? Followed up by welfare because, well, if you've lied to a population and you've told people they don't need each other, this is an attack on the family unit. So that's what child support was intended for, was welfare recovery. The state spends so much, and then the federal government reimburses them for the money they spend out on welfare expenditures. Well, they started making so much money, they couldn't stop. So that's not the best explanation I could give, but that's what this is about, is the attack on the family unit. Child support was intended to help women who were single mothers take care of their children. That's what they were told, at least. But no, it was all about the Title 4D funding and using your children to generate profits. Like I said, it was intended for welfare recovery, but when a state, okay, there again, Tennessee, because it's relative to me, I'm in Tennessee. For every dollar the state spends on welfare expenditures, the federal government is reimbursing them almost $6 on the dollar. So you see how over an extended period of time, how much money that can generate. It's outrageous. I think Texas, for every dollar Texas spends, they get back from the federal government almost $13. And that's just two of those states, two of the 50 states. And Maximus operates contracts for child support in all 50 states. So it's just hand over fist for profits. But there again, child support was intended to reimburse the federal government for the welfare expenditures coming from the state. But they just saw a way to make that much money. I mean, it's hand over fist. So it comes down to globalism, the destruction of the family unit, and that was, for all intents and purposes, that's who was really pushing Maximus to come into being, with some of the globalists. Donald Rumsfeld was one of them. Then I found funding from the Rothschilds, George Soros. This is all in SEC filings I found from Maximus. So they're all involved in it. The Rothschilds are investors in their IT division. So they look at people as like a human capital. It's just a terrible system at best. Yeah, the original intent for child support was touted as welfare expenditure recovery, but I think, what I said earlier, every case is a taxable event. So the more court cases you have, the more money you generate.
It just turned into a cash cow for them. And
yeah,
it's going to take that away. If you're generating so much money, that's whether if it's fair or not, that's not something that's going to go away until it's not profitable. That's the whole driving force behind these systems.
Yeah. You've got, how do I say this? You've got an ever-present means of making money because people are always going to have children. Whether or not they take care of them is inconsequential. They'll be placed into the system and they will make money off them. So it's just, it's a vicious cycle, you know. I've found so much, it's hard for me to make it coherent to most people. So some of it's just floating up here in the ether, you know. So that's why I tweet a lot about it, is to make it cohesive for most people. I can't articulate it as well as I should be able to, but it's what texting for me is for personally.
I think
It's just much information.
you do a great job articulating it. The problem is with stories that are this big and that have, you've been researching now 2013 through 2014, like starting to go down this path. That's a long time to compress into a short answer. So I think that's what a lot of people struggle with, whether you're a survivor or an activist or a parent. If you've involved yourself in any way, or if you've gotten involved in any type of way or been forced to get involved in any way with these systems over a long period of time, and you research it and you do start to understand it, you realize the broadness of it, and that it is really hard to explain. That's the whole point. That's why people have trouble believing it, because they can only understand or comprehend one little piece, and like that one little piece seems like a conspiracy theory because they can't comprehend the bigger whole.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking, okay, Maximus itself is, there again, they were founded in 1975, but they were there before that, right? So we'll just say, for all intents and purposes, that they were founded in 1975. Well, even starting from that year, they've been in business for almost 50 years. So even from then till now, the amount of contracts they've had, the amount of programs they ran and still run, it's mind-boggling. And this is just one company involved in this global system of child trafficking. And it's, when I say child trafficking, I'm referring to myself even. I was born in 77, so they've made money off of me. My parents, Maximus has access to the data sets beginning in the 30s. That's when the birth certificate registry really began. It was in the 30s because of the Emergency Banking Act of 1933. They started making the birth certificate is the primary account. The Social Security number is the secondary or minor account. So they have access to all that and have had access to it. HIPAA laws, they disregard HIPAA laws. That was part of the Affordable Health Care Act. That completely destroyed HIPAA. So I don't mean to be a negative Nancy, but anybody that thinks you should have privacy. You should have complete privacy or anonymity, however you want to say it, about your medical records or anything of that nature. You should, but we do not. If Maximus contracts with the NSA, I've got a FOIA request back from the NSA. They could not disclose any of the contracts they have between themselves. It could not. And I didn't pursue it because I didn't want somebody showing up at my house asking why I keep pushing. These are very real things that I have to deal with, and people who have gone down this path. Nancy Schaefer, for one, she was a Georgia state senator. She was found dead, her and her husband. So anybody who's really pushed the fact is usually made to shut up or they disappear. And that's the reality of all this. So I've been reluctant in sharing a lot of my information. I'm not scared by any means. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. But I am very pragmatic, and I have to watch out for my family. So, and that would be what I tell anybody who decides to pursue this. Be careful, study, share with who you trust and where you can, because it's about the children. This is about my child, and any parent who's watching this who cares. Speak loud. Don't be scared.
Gosh, it's amazing seeing more and more parents come out talking, but there's so many still that they're intimidated into silence, or they're scared, or they have resources taken away from them, or there's so much red tape too that the court puts on parents to almost intimidate them into silence legally.
That they do that. It's either through duress, some bogus court order, saying a gag order or whatever else. They've taken my driver's license, and I can't even obtain a passport. I can't leave the country until all the child support's paid off, even though I just have child support arrears. So these are ways that they do exactly what you said, and they intimidate, put you in jail, anything to keep all this under wraps. They don't want people to know any of this information. It would upset their little playhouse.
What are your personal views on child support? I've met a lot of parents who have had that same sentence, or ask that, hey, since you don't have rights with the child, you still have to pay the other parent. Some of these parents that I've talked to, the people that they're being asked to pay child support to are raping the child that got taken away from them. Right. So you can see the reluctance of that fairness of, why would I go pay this person to abuse my child? I'd love to hear your view on what you think about child support. You talked about kind of the overview of how it was created and what maybe it was intended for, but I'd love to hear kind of your own personal thoughts on it.
I'll appropriate a statement from somebody I know who studies the 4D program a lot. And he said, your child was made in private, and you should take care of them in the private. In other words, there shouldn't be, maybe in extreme circumstances, should there be a court order for someone, male or female, to pay a child support order, right? Otherwise, it should be up to the parents. But what both men and women do not realize is when child support is applied for, a certain amount of your parental rights are yielded to receive those services. So they interject themselves regardless of whether you like it or not. My personal opinion of child support, my strong stance is, I don't need the government telling me how to take care of my child. Never needed them to tell me how to take care of my child. These amounts that some parents pay is just outrageous. Me personally, at one time, I was paying a little over $1,100 a month for my daughter, and it was only after, gosh, 7 or 8 years that it was reduced to about half of that. I was paying my more in child support than my daughter's mother was making at her job. Yeah. Thus far, I'm almost $70,000 in child support that I've paid, and that's just a small amount. Like I know people pay six figures. Um, but there again, it should not be up to the government. They should not have their nose in parental rights. They should not. In extreme circumstances, I can see it, but otherwise, leave the parents alone. They know what's best for their children. Um, but yeah, you've got abusive parents. Um, I mean, you do have deadbeats, and I hate to use that term because that was something else created by the child support system, was the deadbeat parent. Um, you do need some sort of laws set up for those people. Um, I just can't imagine not taking care of your child, just because you're maybe angry or bitter for whatever reason at the other parent, whatever. Um, yeah, take care of your kids. But I don't need somebody to tell me that.
Or if you do, at least, I know, I don't know if you said this live or whenever we were just chatting, but you're like, hey, this people have a trouble comprehending that this is happening, and they think that there's no way that the system could have glitched kind of to become this, where it was designed for this. It's not something that glitched, or it's not something that's wrong with it. It's
Yeah, yeah,
functioning exactly how it was designed to.
yeah. Thank you for reiterating that. Yeah, because what we were talking about before we started recording is that the knee-jerk reaction for everybody is just pay your child support, and you know no harm will befall you. Yeah, that can be farther from the truth. you know um People paid child support, and a lot of bad has happened to them, but everybody's under that spell that that's all you have to do is just pay your child support. It's a and that's been ingrained into the culture. They've made it a cultural thing. um and it started with minorities, and then it's you know what was viewed as, oh, that's just the minorities that have to do that. No, no, that was not the intent from the people who created the system. They wanted everybody to fall under this. So that's where we're at.
Yeah.
um it's a welfare state. It's a welfare state.
And so
um
depending on these corrupt systems that were designed to be corrupt, to have a verdict on what a parent or parents should do, for one, like you said, do parents need the assistance of a government to make a decision? Maybe there are some people that do. But even those
yeah,
people, they're relying on a system that's built on corruption to make that decision. So you essentially have these two wrongs that are trying to make a right, and it never equates to a right.
yeah, and it never will. They're That's opposing ideology. I'm like, you can't do bad over here, then do bad over here and expect a positive result. It just this does not equate. So yeah, I just wish more people would, instead of just putting your blinders on about what's happening, figure out what's happening. um,
Now, what
look,
would you suggest to parents who are either going through what you are, or even parents that who are listening and they're like, that could never happen to me. It could happen to anybody, right? If you were to give advice or go back in time, what are some things that you would advise other parents to do if they find themselves in a similar position?
knowing now what I do, first it would be no birth certificate. That's the beginning of the woes.
Why?
You're a, a, a birth certificate, by legal definition, is a warehouse receipt. You are now government property. Same thing with a marriage license. You are now in a contract with the government. They don't tell you these things. Do not. Maybe that's another topic for for another day. But um, read as many laws as you can. Study, find any confirmed source that's correct. You know, like make sure your information's correct before you think about fighting these people. They're professional liars. That's how they make their money. Read the Constitution. You know, read anything you can that will provide you with the strongest foundation as possible, because you're going to need all your wits to fight these people, to get them out of your lives. There's a lot more that I wish I had done, and it's, you know, learning about all the influences that the courts have in them, what they're capable of. But there again, you know, read the laws, find ways to study with people who are going through what you are. I'm in groups on Facebook, not so much on Twitter. You know, Twitter's kind of my standalone thing, I guess. But even at that, you know, I'm getting a lot of good people helping me. There are groups on Facebook in particular, you know, people who've been, you know, gone through parental alienation, either, you know, that, or they had their parental rights stripped out, you know, outright stripped. Websites about child support laws, how to fight that, you know. I can't think of too many things more nefarious or evil than the family court system and the child support system, and what I've seen it do. Just find like-minded people, anybody that can provide you with good information. But you have to be proactive about it too. You can't sit back. Admittedly, that was one of my faults. Is like, there again, you know, oh, I'll be truthful and honest and things will work out. No. You can't sit back and allow these people to ruin your lives, and they will. So find a support group. I think a lot of parents who go through this have fallen into depression, you know, or, you know, various mental states that aren't conducive to getting you out of whatever the situation is in. So find good people. Support groups are incredibly helpful. You know, I went through a long time by myself, you know, not knowing where to turn to, not knowing where, couldn't find a starting point, you know. Maximus kind of did that for me, of course, but don't feel like you're alone in this fight. That's why we're all here. Yeah, that's my best advice, is stick with people you know who are going to be there for you. You know, fair weather friends are just that.
And there are so many of you fighting. You might all be silenced in some ways, and it might be hard to find each other. But I think everybody feels when they're faced in that, and they get that verdict, you know, it's embarrassing to go back and tell people, because that's the perception that people have, is they judge. They think that, again, the courts are there for justice. So if they made a ruling, that it must be correct. And that can be really hard too, to be vulnerable with people and say, hey, they made this verdict and it doesn't seem right to me in any type of way. You know, like there was all this evidence presented, and this is what they chose to do. And that can be very isolating for people, because who do you turn to when you're faced with, you're against these people who have so much power and who have created these rulings over you, you know? But it's wonderful going online now, and even a lot of the parents that I've had on my own show are connected in little groups now, and they found each other, whether it was through me or just through people that have been on my show who introduced them or referred them to certain people. And I'm seeing that on Twitter, I'm seeing that on Facebook. So it's wonderful to see that these voices and these isolated stories aren't so isolated, and that there are so many support systems out right now for people who are out there talking about it and being vulnerable and sharing and sticking next to their convictions and saying, this isn't something I'm ashamed of, this is something that's wrong. And it's about the children. It's not about my ego, it's not about whatever the verdict was. This is about right or wrong for my child, and a right or wrong verdict, and the verdict was wrong. It shouldn't have been what it was. And it's important that, like you said, the Constitution doesn't apply. There's no recording, so where's the accountability? That's it. Like, there's just a ruling and that's it. Like, football doesn't even get away with that. A referee can make a
Right,
call and they
right.
go back and replay it. Is that way? And sometimes they're wrong. And so having that accountability, like, that's something that I wish that there was recordings, that people could go in and listen, that everything in court was recorded. I don't understand why it's not. I do, understanding that it's built off corruption. They don't want people to hear, because if people did, that would be, all eyes would be
Yeah,
on court if people actually saw. But I just cannot believe that there's not cameras and recordings in court.
it's, and what they maintain, and for certain sensitive cases, I'll say, like where there's extensive abuse or things of that nature. I get that, right? But whereas most cases, and I don't want to alienate anybody here, but most cases should be recorded. That way, one side or the other can go back and say, well, this is factually wrong, or this is factually right, whatever. But these corrupt judges and DAs, court clerks, I mean, there will eventually be accountability. What type of accountability, I don't know. I hope it's positive accountability where there's a systematic change. We can change the entire system as it stands. But there aren't too many depths, too many lengths that a loving parent won't go to or through for their child. And whether it be suing a judge or suing an attorney, suing a DA, whatever, there's that side. But the other part of me says that there might be some extremists out there, I'm not saying that's right by any means. Violence is never, violence begets violence, and I hope it never gets to that, but I think it may reach that tipping point. And I hate to say that.
I agree with you. I'm always constantly wondering that, because I'm not a violent person, but hearing about what happens to children and to parents, it's infuriating to the point where I think even the calmest person, that's what incites that passion of, this needs to change. They hide it from people on purpose because they know that if society actually knew what was going on, that is exactly what would happen. People would be so enraged that they would literally get together, just like what used to happen back in the day with their pitchforks and guns. And
Yeah,
there would be a revolution if people understood, and I feel like we're kind of on that tipping point where more and more people are understanding and more people are getting mad.
Yep. I think you're seeing that, through all these ridiculous and evil vaccine mandates, right? People weren't saying too much. They should have already been saying something. They weren't saying too much until it started affecting their children, right? So that's when you started seeing the parents stand up and going after the school boards and whomever else. Well, it's been like that way for a long time in the family court system. So you can see some direct parallels there. But there again, they've had us under a spell for a long time. Not just the family court system, but public health, and this is one, all these word games that the doctors and attorneys play, and doctors are involved in the family court system, right? So they're involved, like the mental health care part, the medical kidnapping, monitoring you and your child from the time you get pregnant to the time you have the child, you know. Um, so without those spells and those veils that they've casted over our eyes, their system would fall. And that's like, there again, I think we're eventually going to see that. Just my opinion.
Absolutely. Now, knowing that there's backlash that people could have, and knowing that people still think that none of this is real or that we're just conspiracy theorists, and also knowing the danger that comes with speaking out, what encouraged you, or what was your kind of aha moment for deciding to go public with talking about this the way that you do?
Probably my faith, I am not that, I am not the most devout person. I don't attend church like I should, my personal opinion. I don't attend church like I should. There are certain things um, I'm just not about it. I'm not as devout as some people of my faith, right? Regardless, the only force I'm afraid of is God. I could care less about what a man can do to me. So that's my sense. I'm not afraid of anything here on this earth. I'm not concerned about whether I please a man or a woman or anybody. I'm worried about if I please the Creator. If I please God. That's who I'm concerned about. um, and I've been through so much. I was just like, you know what? They're not going to intimidate me. They're not going to scare me. They can put handcuffs on me. They can put me in jail. They can beat me, shut me up, or try to shut me up, but it's not going to work. So I'm not intimidated by any of them.
I think you're such a hero in so many ways for being like that. I wish more men and women, but when it comes to you talking about children and giving them a voice, I wish more men had that conviction that you do, to be so persistent in your message despite what people might think. Because it's sad. These kids don't have champions. They don't have Twitter. They can't go, tell people what they're going through, and they're silenced in a lot of ways too, even as they get older. But it's like, if we're not going to be their voice, then who is? And I love that you demonstrate that so well, and you're so inspiring to me for that reason.
Yeah, I was raised in the church where men spoke out and men were accountable. If they were wrong, they admitted it. But they were the biggest champions for their family too, one is not exclusive, or I don't know how to say that. I'll say that it's been ingrained into the male culture, and probably in the past 20 years. Be more feminine and this, that, and the other. Be more in touch with your feelings and be more empathetic and sympathetic. Well, that's fine, but be a man. Stand up. There's nothing that I know of, or the way I was raised, that kept me from sharing my feelings about anything. If anything, that makes you more of a man. But it's been ingrained into our culture, and men have been emasculated. Toxic masculinity and all that BS. You wouldn't have a lot of the things that we have in society if it wasn't for toxic masculinity. Whatever that means. be a man, stand up for your family. If you don't, if you don't have a family to stand up for somebody else. Give somebody who doesn't have a voice a voice. So,
Gosh, the only toxic masculinity I can think of is the lack of masculinity, not
exactly.
surplus of it, you know?
That's what's toxic, is men not being men. And I'm not, and when I say that, I don't mean, being able to lift a lot of weight or any, being a great athlete or blah, 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 or anything associated with that. Yeah. Be a man of God. Be a man of faith. And do not yield. Like you said, what's toxic is indifference and not caring. Like, if you stop caring, then you've already lost. And that goes for men and women. If you stop caring, you've already lost the fight. Yeah, you've acquiesced. So.
What can people do to support you, Jack?
I'm not looking for any kind of financial gain. Honestly, I'm not. I offer all the information I have, free of charge. I have no issues. I would say that if you're going to support me, jump on my Twitter feeds. If you've got information that can add to the narrative, or that you may find some stuff that I'm tweeting out that's not accurate or could be more accurate, correct me. I do not want to lead anybody down a path of incorrect information. That's pretty bad stuff right there when you start doing that, because once a lie gets repeated, it's just continually repeated. So, like I said, just jump on my feeds, posts, whatever. I'm on Twitter and Facebook. I have an IG, but I use IG primarily for my artwork, pretty much exclusively for my artwork.
Oh, you do art? That's really cool. What kind of art?
Colored pencil, collage illustration. But supporting me, just be a friend.
Well, that's one thing that I love about you in general is your open-mindedness. Your curiosity trumps your ego. You're always curious to find the truth, whether that means being wrong 20 million times to get there or finding the answer on the first time, but I love that you invite that from other people and say, hey, contribute to my story. If you have something valuable to add, or if you know something that I haven't covered, show me. And if you can make my answer better or lead me somewhere that I'm more clear, show me, right? Because that empowers you to get closer to where you need to be. And it empowers everybody reading the content to have all the different aspects that they need to create that big picture. And I just love that about you, Jack. I think you're amazing in so many ways. I think your daughter is so lucky that she has you. There's not a lot of parents that I personally see, I'm surrounded by them now, but when I look outside of the few that have come forth and who have been trying to use their voice for so long, it's few and far in between to see parents that are actually being active, speaking out, using their voice, and not being intimidated into silence over the court systems or whoever is intimidating them in order to stick up for a child or their kid or somebody else's child. And just to stand up and do what's right. And you're a real standout with that, not just as a man, but as a human. I think your voice is so powerful in what you represent, how you carry yourself. And I think you're a role model in so many ways. And I just want to thank you for what you're doing, because I've learned so much from you. I've had so much fun getting to know you and reading your content. And, I think your story is important, and I think everybody needs to hear it. And I'm so grateful that you chose to come on here with me today.
You know what, like, thank you. We're all trying to add to the narrative, right? You know, try to expose what's happening. We all have our roles to play. And we couldn't do that without people like you, Emma. So I know, particularly for myself, it's, you know, it's sincere. So when we say thank you, we mean it. Yeah. Truth is, whether people like it or not, the truth is the truth. And it doesn't care about, I don't know how to articulate that. Truth doesn't care about feelings, you know, or ego. And that's one thing I don't want people to think about me is he's egotistical, or he's tooting his own horn, or putting the information out there so he can say he put the information out there. No. I'm working off a lot of great people who came before me, and tried to add to the narrative. And even if we can help one person, you know. So yeah, I'm thankful. I'm thankful for you, and for anybody who's listening, or can follow what I'm saying. So I don't mean to ramble, but it's a lot of information, you know, a lot of emotions for everybody involved in all of this. So thank you.
Thank you too. It's an honor. Like I said, I've wanted to sit down with you just because I get bits and pieces of your story off Twitter. I really wanted to learn this because I think this is an important piece of the puzzle that I've missed, and that I haven't been presented with. And I don't think a lot of parents or people have, you know, and it's important that we know who's governing over us, who's governing over the systems that we're depending to have jurisdiction over us, our body, our family,
Yeah.
and to understand that. And if anything else, like you said, if it only helps one person, that's such a miracle to be able to do that, you know. And I know that you're helping so many more people, and you're going to just continue to help people. And I'm actually excited to kind of see where your journey goes, because I think you're just getting started with what you're doing. And I think your years of knowledge might have fallen on deaf ears in the past, but I think people are waking up to this stuff being real, or at least recognizing that maybe there's questions to be asked, and they're going to be depending on people like you to learn from, and to have somebody that welcomes them with open arms, instead of the hate culture that we've developed and the division, you know. And I think that you're going to have such a strong voice as people start waking up and needing resources on, where do I go to learn about some of this. And I commend you for that. I think you're incredible, and I appreciate you coming on here with me today.
I couldn't thank you enough, Emma, you know. And if for anybody, you know, watching this, you know, or who will be watching this, the takeaway from this conversation we've had today is, you know, start with Maximus. Research as much as you can. If you have any questions, reach out to me. You can find me on Twitter. You know, I have 2 Facebook accounts, right?
What are your names on Twitter and Facebook if people want to go connect with you?
Jack Pendergrass. You know, I have 2 different profile pictures on Facebook, right? And I think my Twitter handle is Nuga Jack 1776, or I think so. I know if they can find you, they can find me. But yeah, any questions, you know, if I don't know what you're asking about, then I'll try to find out so we both know. I think my IG, if you want artwork, is J Pendergrass Art and Illustration. I try to keep things simple.
I'll link all of that below. And Jack, if there's any kind of starting point articles or things that you want to send that I can link in the show notes for people to get started on their Maximus journey, or if there's anything else that can help guide them, you can definitely send that to me and I can post that in the show notes too, so people can just go click on it and start reading about this and getting some more information on it.
Definitely, like I said, I know so much about this stuff, like it's hard to make it coherent. So I'll send you some links that are much more up to date, because I've taken this research back 60 years for Maximus, right? So I'll send you some links that are relevant to now. And that way, nobody's kind of like, God, this guy's just rambling. I'll send you some links about what Obamacare did, the Affordable Health Care Act, and a few other choice articles. There again, if you read it and there's things that I've missed, point them out. I'll be glad to read all this stuff. There's a ton of it.
Oh my gosh, so much stuff on this. And I'll also post all of your social media accounts. I'll put that in the show notes too. So people listening, please go support Jack. As you can see, just by listening to him, if he hasn't already captured your heart, I don't know it will. Just an amazing, genuine person and a true patriot and voice for the children. And he's somebody that you want in your corner. He's somebody to go learn from. He's somebody accessible to you. He gets right back to me. He didn't even know me the second that I reach out. He's very accessible and kind with his correspondences. So get to know Jack. Go get in on his conversations and learn from him. He'll sit there and say, I'm not a guru on this stuff, but I would beg to differ and say he's done quite a bit of research and he knows a thing or two that all of us can learn from him. So go follow him, share his content. That's one of the best ways that you can help support parents and survivors and activists. We're constantly getting shut down and censored and deleted and separated from society whenever we try to go online and talk about this. So you help our algorithms when you connect with us and engage with us and just support us as our journey goes on. So I encourage you all to please connect with Jack, share this episode far and wide. That also helps the algorithms and helps awaken more people and could possibly help save a life, or help parents navigate a really hard situation, or at the very least, just let people know that they're not alone. And that's really important now that we're providing that type of support, even if it is just by sharing a podcast episode or a Twitter account. And Jack he's a wealth of knowledge. So if you know parents too that are going through something hard, or if you are worried yourself, you have a resource in your corner that's willing to help and help at least get you information to help guide you in a right direction or to start your own research. So I encourage you guys all to go connect with Jack and support what he's doing and go buy some of his art. I need to go look at that too. Please support our podcast too by subscribing, by sharing, by just engaging with it. It helps. Every little bit helps. Especially, I haven't really announced this on a podcast yet, but those of you who follow me on YouTube, I was completely nuked off YouTube. My year's worth of work gone. But I'm excited to rebuild and to be engaged with platforms that support my content. So that's going to be my focus, is rebuilding on platforms that support my voice and that I don't have to worry about getting taken down. So it always helps just knowing that you guys are there to support us no matter where you're at. And if we do get taken off somewhere, that you guys can come find us again. So we appreciate you guys being here. And I just want to give a quick shout out to our sister podcast, the Save Our Children podcast with Becky and Bridget. And then also to Live Mana Worldwide Foundation and Multimedia Broadcast Network, who stepped in after my account got taken down and said, we'll help host your podcast for you. So I actually get to have my live premieres on their site, and they have some really incredible attributes and features that they're allowing me to use instead of YouTube. So thank you guys so much for stepping up and helping me get my podcast back up and running. But Jack, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
No, just a sincere thank you to you and to your podcast host, whoever's hosting, And yeah, you said it well. Don't feel alone. Reach out, to somebody, to anybody. Um, this is not something we're going to get through alone. We got to fight together. Any information I have it's free. I'm not charging anybody anything. So, um, yeah, that's it.
Jack, you're amazing. And I'm sure I'll talk to you on Twitter and just a little bit also, but it's been an honor getting to talk to you and learning from you. And I appreciate your time today and your energy and all this amazing information that hopefully people will go take and start researching for their own. So just thank you so much for being here and for being a voice for the kids.
You're welcome, Anna. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And hopefully we'll get you back on again. I think that there's a lot more that we can cover. But until then, thank you for being here. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys next week on The Imagination.